Podcasters Roundtable, round 64, the podcast that pays, ... for itself. All right, so, wow. I was really excited to talk about this. It was just a simple question, but you bring up money in podcasting. This goes back to all time. I remember 2005, people were having arguments. It seems to bring up a lot of emotion. So I put this question out on Google+. There was a somewhat contentious post. Got a ton of comments. So I'm excited to bring it back up, maybe, because it sounds like people really want to. Do this topic. Since we're watching live, and I didn't press record on the recorder because we're getting some feedback issues, I'm gonna re-roll for the recording. Podcasters Roundtable, round 64, the podcast that pays ... for itself. All right, I was really excited to talk about this topic. This is funny, the people who are live. If you're listening on the on the podcast version, we did a brief restart, but there was I asked this question on Google+. It turned into a contentious post. I don't like being in that headspace. People getting nasty. It's just not fun. But when you bring up the topic of podcasting and money, it seems to spark something. It always has. The conversation between making money and being a hobby and all that stuff, there's always been a lot of debate around that. I think the debate has changed, but anyways, in the interest of extracting what was good from the conversation out of what was not so good, let me say that while the definitions on this round make it fuzzy, like when does a podcast become a business, right? I mean, there's a personal perspective, there's a legal perspective. We all have different definitions of things, and different people have definitions for us, but that's another round, because we need a whole round to cover that kind of thing, and we will bring in the appropriate lawyers, hopefully, to help us through that conversation. And if you've tuned in the past, I think it's Podcasters Roundtable, I think I wrote it down, 38, Podcasting the Law. We actually hit on some of those issues. So as a general PSA right up front, if you are making any kind of money from your podcast, make sure you are complying with all your laws, like your taxes and everything. Do what it takes to protect yourself. If that means talking to a lawyer, seek out that advice for yourself. And just know that once money is made, you may be putting yourself into a different category, and something more. You may have to do something more for that, maybe not. Regardless of whether you consider it personally, still just a hobby. So that is my general PSA. And for this round, because I really came up with the question because there's this middle ground, I feel like, between having zero interest in making a dime with your podcast and all the way to being full-on business. This is what you're here for. It's why you start a podcast. And right in the middle is I think where a lot of podcasters sit. They start a podcast just because they want to. They want to talk about that topic. And then they find out maybe, I didn't even think of the possibility that it could actually make a little money, enough to help me pay for hosting, the costs that get incurred by starting a podcast, or maybe we can make that podcast better. And the community wants to do it for you. Sometimes people just offer, say, hey, how can I support you, right? So we're sort of focusing on there, and we're going to push away the legal stuff again, refer to the PSA, and we're going to sort of just figure out if you are interested, if that's you, if you're interested in making a little money, not I'm going to do this and quit my job money, just supporting the show. And we're going to find out what that means for you. It means something different for everyone. If that's your interest, then we're going to see how the panel is currently doing that and maybe some ideas and things you can explore for a podcast that pays for itself. So let's get to the round right up first. Sitting right underneath me if you're watching live. I guess it depends how you size your browser. Daniel J. Lewis.
Thank you very much. And yes, my podcasts do pay for themselves, ranging from what we could say, quote, hobby, unquote, podcasts to business podcasts. They do all pay for themselves, and then some in some cases.
Very cool. Co-host, that is, Daniel J. Lewis. Probably, he is always contingent on the size of the browser, but Dave is always just a small man in a box. No, I've met him in person. Dave Jackson, welcome to the Podcaster Roundtable. Co-host.
I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting, and some of my podcasts pay for themselves. A couple of them never, ever will. And that's fine.
Yeah, perfect. And we'll get into like differences for you, what that means for your show. All right, new roundtabler Gary, welcome to Podcasters Roundtable.
Ray, it's a pleasure to be here.
You have killer audio. Sounds great.
PR40.
Yeah, you should. I mean, you do. Don't you do a ham radio podcast? Is that your niche?
Yes, it's called Ham Radio Now.
Yeah, I try not to have too many high expectations because I don't want people, in the lead up to being on the show, I say use the best mic you have. I mean, if that's the earbud mic you have, if you can take a step beyond the onboard microphone, I appreciate it. But when I say that, I fear people, they think, oh, I don't have a PR40 or I don't have, Daniel, someone just reminded me to change this. Thanks, Dave. Of course, change the shot. If you're watching the video, I locked the screen, so now you can see everybody. But yes, so I fear people when I say that are worried that I don't have the right microphone. Nope, we just want to get you on, get your content, and sometimes we get some big winners because Gary, it does sound beautiful, but that's his niche. He's got the gear, and we'll see that in the background. It looks pretty cool. All right, also new roundtabler, Steven, welcome to the roundtable.
Hey, thanks for having me. Can you hear me all right?
And we hear you good. You sound good too.
Good. Well, everything I learned about podcasting, I learned from you guys. So.
Oh boy,
Yeah,
man! I think that should come with a disclaimer too. Probably there's a PSA in there somewhere.
Apple. Now I sound better. But Stephen Grasso, Cafe Racer podcast, and we're kind of not quite there yet with having the podcast pay for itself. Getting there, but not quite yet. And it all depends on how you define that. So is it just hosting fees, or is that equipment? Everything. And we'll talk about it.
Big time. I think that's one of the keys. The perception of what that means, or just what that means for your show, right? Like you said, doesn't mean hosting. Doesn't mean I upgrade my gear. I mean, Gary, you do ham radio now, so do you need to try out new gear every year? And does the community help support that? Are you interested in that?
I guess
Things like that.
Yeah, I didn't mention it. It pays for itself.
Yeah, that's good. And because I think we had, right, so, Stephen, not quite there yet. We have a couple podcasters who have reached that threshold and in some cases have passed that threshold. My own shows definitely pay the podcasting bills. And then, it goes beyond that a little bit too. I couldn't quit my job and expect to feed my family on my podcast. Not even close. It would be on the street. So there is that middle ground. But what does it mean to you? So, Dave, when I say what does paying for your podcast mean for you and your show, you listed a couple different shows, some that do, some that never will. So when I say that, paying for your podcast, what does that mean?
For me, that means paying my hosting bill, both my media and my audio host and my domain name. Because if I don't pay those, I don't have a podcast. And you're right, and that's paying me zero for my time. So if I'm just going to cover the cost, the money out of my wallet, that's what I'm talking about.
Right, and that's a huge key, right? Because if we actually tallied out the hours that you would put into the show versus what comes back to it, you could be making like 2 cents an hour, and then is it really paying for itself?
Right.
Because we know podcasting takes a lot of time, and it's hard. At least to do well. Some people tell you it doesn't have to be, but in my experience, to do it well, it takes a considerable amount of time. So, yeah, I wanted to ask more about that. What show? You don't have to share with us what show pays for itself, which does not.
Oh, well, though I just started Weekly Web Tools for the longest time. Kind of pays for itself because I talk about different tools for websites. And some of them have affiliate programs, but not all of them, and I don't choose them based on their affiliate program, but a lot of them are free. And so I was just playing around with stuff, and my audience suggested you should have a Patreon page for this. And I'm like, okay. So I set up a Patreon page, and for 3 weeks I had absolutely zero patrons. And all of a sudden the last week, a bunch of people have jumped on board. So I now make, you ready for this, $19 a month, which will pay for most of my hosting and everything like that. So I'm pretty much almost in the clear there. Again, with the occasional affiliate sale coming through.
Yeah, and was that, for you, when you started that show, what was the motivation? What was the plan? Was there a plan?
There was no plan. The plan was, hey, I like website stuff. I like technology. Let's talk about it. And then over the years, I will occasionally have something come through, and if it's a plugin or something, a premium plugin, I'll earn an affiliate on that. Another one is my Logical Weight Loss podcast, where all I do there now is talk about Amazon. And at the end of the show, if you'd like to support the show, you don't have to. Go to Amazon. We all know the pitch. And I think I get around $20 a month in affiliate sales because that audience is primarily women, and if we want to go stereotypical, they like to shop. And they do. And enough to where even at whatever it is, 4%, I'm making like $20 a month in affiliate sales. So that one, again, is pretty much covering the cost of everything.
Right. Yeah, I like to shop. I like to buy a lot of gear.
Yeah.
I like to window shop. Let's see that. I don't know that I buy. I get some stuff in for review that I didn't have to send back. Usually at a request, like, hey, I want to try that out because I think I'll like it. If I do, then I'll review it, or I'll say don't buy this. But yeah, unfortunately, most of the stuff you see me use I don't get to keep. But I do like the window shop for it. It is fun. There's a new mixer just came out. It's like multi-channel from Allen and Heath. And I'm like, ooh, I don't even need it. But it's small, it's compact. I'm not going to get it, but I'm able to stop myself. But yeah, so with the show, you say that will never pay for itself. Because you're not trying, or because it just doesn't lend itself to. I mean, there's always a way, right? Well, I think we'll find out there's always a way. If you wanted it to pay for itself, there's always a way to make that happen.
Well, part of it is you have to deliver value, and this show doesn't. It's my Building a Better Dave show. I'm trying to make you laugh or cry. Like, I'm just usually just talking about what's going on in my life. To me, it's my therapy. It really is at times. I don't mention Amazon. It's just me talking to you and letting you know what's going on, and that's fine. That show is never meant to be remotely anything. It's just me sharing pearls of wisdom, hopefully, or nuggets of comedy or whatever. So I've never meant it to be, and I think it's on the $7 a month plan at Libsyn. It's less than $1 a day. So and that's fine. That is officially not, that was never in the plans for that one.
Yeah, and I didn't mention up front, but we are now, this is the first time, thanks to Daniel's urging, we are now at podcastersroundtable.com/live. Okay, so it's easier. I already broke the chat out. It's over there. You can watch and chat more easily than the way it was set up. Although I still somewhat reliant on the Google system, but we're working it out. But go to podcastersroundtable.com/live if you either want to see the chat that happened or you want to chat live with us right now. So, Gary, when I ask that question, paying for your podcasts, what does that mean for your show?
I can give you some real numbers. I actually began selling DVDs and stuff in 2004. And I'm old. I may be the oldest person that's ever been on Podcasters Roundtable. I don't know. I'm 66. So it took a while for me to understand this podcasting thing. So I started in 2004 doing selling DVDs, producing programs and DVDs and stuff. And then the online program started 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago. So I went into QuickBooks and surprised myself because I did a little calculation as to how much I have made, both selling DVDs and in the Ham Radio Now thing, it's viewer contributions on either PayPal or Patreon. And since 2004, surprised the heck out of me, $98,288.76.
Wow. Nice.
That's since 2004 now. That
right.
Divide by 12. So
right.
Last year, 2015, $12,107. The year before that, because of a real successful Kickstarter, which I run to get me out to a conference, $16,000. So it's well above just goof off money, but it is not a living.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that's a good point because you say that right there that it's to get you out to a conference. So you would not be able to attend that conference. I mean, there's always a way, right? So, but you're asking for support to get to that conference, right? So, I mean, they get a higher dollar value because it's a bigger ask, I guess.
I make video of the conference, and it makes like 25 shows, so worth going to. But that year, that was a $12,000 Kickstarter, and it took driving from North Carolina to Seattle, all the way across the country.
Wow.
So.
That is
expensive to do, but I set $12,000. I thought that would pay for all of the expenses and my time of editing all the programs and getting online at approximately minimum wage.
Yeah, right, exactly. All right, Stephen, what is it? It sounds like you're in the process of maybe hoping that your podcast can pay for itself, but what does that mean to you?
Well, we've had a Patreon account for a while, and if you're just like Dave said, if you're just looking at hosting, it's paying for itself. But for us, we've been doing a live show for a long time, and we do rely on more and more videos. So, like, for instance, gear, I just got a Zoom Q8 for when we do field recordings. That's not being paid for out of the account. And honestly, I don't. My co-host Chris Ashmore, he kind of is the one that handles all the money. So at the end of the year, when we have to pay fees, Chris will tell me, yeah, we have enough in there, or no, we got to come up with this. For us, being a motorcycle podcast, there are events we'd like to go to. For instance, the AIM Expo, which is a big industry trade show, it's kind of in my back door in Orlando, so it's a 2-hour drive from me. Well, Chris flew out from San Diego. So, obviously we couldn't pay for that. That was on his own dime, and we'd like to get to the point where some of these things can be covered when it comes to travel expenses, going to rallies, going to events, buying equipment. It is kind of a niche market. And there's a lot of motorcycle podcasts, and motorcycles are kind of divided up into a bunch of different genres, and we kind of, even though we're called the Cafe Racer podcast, cafe racers, vintage bikes, sport bikes, and adventure bikes. We don't really hit the cruiser segment at all, which is probably the bigger segment. And, there was a pretty popular podcast that lasted about 11 years called Side Stand Up that was motorcycle. I don't know if any of you guys ever heard of it, but he had so much advertising going on that he spent probably 10 or 15 minutes of the show running commercials. Mm-hmm. And we don't really want to do that. It's just, we've had some paying sponsors where we ran some short ads for them, but I'd rather not spend a lot of time doing commercials and more talking about, motorcycle content. So,
yeah, that becomes big, huge feedback. I'm waiting for it. It's gone. That becomes an issue. Gosh, hold on. What was I going to say there? When you have to decide, if you do need income to keep going, because it takes a lot of your time, does cost there's fees associated with it. So you have to pull that time from somewhere, your family, your job. Well, you do it after work. You pretty much pull it from your sleep, probably. That's what most podcasters do. But having all that advertising, something like a fan-supported allows you to get away from that, right? So you don't have to cram the show, and it kind of pushed you away from the show, it sounds like. I know even like a Twitch show can be difficult sometimes because the ads might be really long. It's, yes, do we have a fast forward, 30-second skip, whatever? Do we have those? But it's just, I got to do more work to get to the content. So it is an interesting factor when you're deciding to, what model should I go with?
Yeah, I don't want to be married to a sponsor. We have affiliate agreements with some of the larger vendors of motorcycle gear online, and those are starting to pay off. They're starting to work. Part of the issue with us is we're revamping the website now, and we'll be putting more affiliate links in there. We do talk about them during the show. We do put them in the show notes. And that's, we have an Amazon affiliate, but nothing very much from there. It's mostly been some of our online retailers of, accessories and things like that. But, there's people that have had sponsorship from some of the bigger manufacturers. I just don't want to be married to one right now,
Yeah, and that's what we get to make those decisions for our show. So it's really cool. Yeah, at that point you're catering to two audiences at that point. So why not serve the one that is there to consume the content? I like it. I like that model. What model do you guys like, Daniel? If you are going for a podcast that pays for itself, let's just stick there. Without beyond taking, whether it gives you extra money beyond taking care of the podcasting bills. What model do you like for, I guess, someone who's going to say, hey, I'd like to make a few dollars?
I think the model I like the best, and I think that works the best, is if you have something to sell yourself. Now, that could be a product you make. It could be swag for your podcast, like mugs or t-shirts or hats or something like that that's branded with your podcast. Or maybe it's some service you offer, but something you have to sell yourself, I think is the best way to monetize a podcast. But the easiest way is probably with a relevant affiliate link.
Yeah, it's a low-hanging fruit. I mean, here's my thing. I love it when someone has an affiliate link. Personally, again, we get to perception. Sometimes an affiliate link is there, and people are concerned that you're just putting it in front of them to make that money. Well, if you can't trust the person, not sure why you're still following them, but that comes through establishing a relationship, building a community with your podcast. And if you burn that, if you burn that relationship with cheesy affiliate links selling junk, they'll find that out, and it will not benefit you very much. So I like that one because you're basically recommending things already. I mean, almost Amazon pretty much sells everything, and if you're recommending a book, that's the easy one. Then why not have a link? You don't even have to push people to it, but if they discover it through search on your site, whatever it is, Amazon should have to share that with you. So I think that's a great one for offsetting, and it's easy. It's not like you don't have to have you don't have to be a special person to get an account, at least in most cases. Now, some states don't allow you to do the Amazon affiliate thing, so that just sucks. That's a problem, and you may have to find an affiliate through something else. But maybe you can support a smaller retailer or something that way. So yeah, I like that one. It's very easy. Gary, now you've done crowdfunding. Anything else? I mean, you said Kickstarter.
And just asking people for money. I'm curious, what size audience do you need for an affiliate link to start making money?
One.
There's two questions in there, right? I guess, is there a pre-qualification before you'll be accepted to the affiliate program? I don't think so, right? No. The second one, I guess Gary's asking, is when will it actually work? What I like about affiliate links is they are, you put your disclaimer on your site. That is, again, one of those things. Make sure you're complying with the rules. But it's not invasive the way like a Google ad banner is. I remember Google AdWords I had on my blogger site. It was terrible. There were bad ads. It looked terrible. I just took it down. I don't care if I make a little money. It's not worth having that there in front of my audience. So yeah, Daniel says one. I mean, if you are doing a podcast,
someone buys a lot.
yeah. Oh, so you're talking about the amount of money, right? I mean, to cover a podcast, I don't think those expenses are very much. Let's talk about that. I think, Daniel, someone asked in the chat, what are your monthly podcasting expenses?
Yeah, that was something I asked. And here's something, we're kind of dancing around an issue that was brought up a little bit. I mean, we're not intentionally dancing around, but we're bouncing off this issue that was brought up a little bit in the pre-conversation before this episode of, should your hobby pay for itself? And I think you have to look at podcasting is not necessarily a hobby. You look at people who have hobbies like collecting baseball cards or building model airplanes or things like that. Most of the time, what we look at as a hobby is a thing that's self-serving. So for example, I collected coins as a kid. I did that for me, not because I was sharing a message. No one out there in the world was like, oh, Daniel, thank you so much for collecting these coins. I don't know what I would do if you weren't collecting these coins. Your collecting of these coins really makes my day. No one said that, because most hobbies are self-serving. They serve the person whose hobby it is. But with podcasting, it may be a hobby to the podcaster, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the difference, I think, between a hobby podcast and other hobbies, and I think there are other hobbies that do this, is that a podcast can affect other people, and it can improve someone else's life or their day. It could be a comedy podcast that gives them the only smile they could have during an otherwise crappy day. It could be something that helps them improve their job, whatever. Yeah, it may be a hobby to you as the podcaster, but someone else is receiving value from it. And I think in that case, it's totally okay to see that you're making money from your, quote, hobby, unquote, because you're giving value. So it's okay for other people to ask for other people to give value in return.
Yeah, and then that's one of my things about definitions, perspectives, all that stuff, because I would disagree, right? Because I would say that a hobby I mean, podcasting completely self-serving. We've talked about it on past rounds where I think that a lot of times you do get into it for yourself. You have to if you want to keep going. You want to talk about that thing. I mean, you want to share it. But if it's the thing you do in your spare time for free or whatever, you buy a little gear, right? Just like you buy equipment, and you do it. Then it's your hobby. It's what you spend all your time. I don't know if you want to say relaxing, but that's what you enjoy when you're maybe off the job or whatever. So I think just the fact that it serves others, that's a byproduct of your hobby. I mean, my hobby could be sailing boats, and I go down to the local park, and the kids, they show up to watch me sail my boat. They are now getting value out of and that's totally unintentional. That's not why I'm there.
There's a tipping point, though, Ray. That the thing is at what point, if you take pictures, let's say, and both of us have a photography background. My hobby in photography went to a job.
Yeah.
And we've never saw ourselves as hobbyist podcasters. We're a media outlet. To us, it's no different for us than a TV show about motorcycles. We just don't make enough money to live off of it. So,
and that's it. It's all based. It's all perception. It's what do you come into it for? You came into it. You viewed yourself as a media outlet. I mean, like anyone can enter. So anyone has their own. They bring their own thing, right?
The thing is like we were talking about affiliates getting approved to be an affiliate. When we register to go to a trade show, we're registering as media. We're vetted. We've got to put our website in. They want to know what our audience size is like. So I think that, especially for some of the bigger trade shows, the guy that starts, a motorcycle podcast and he doesn't even know what his analytics are, and he registers a lot of these things, he's not going to get approved as media. So not trying to toot our own horn and saying that we're big, but we put time and effort into it to be legitimate as a media outlet. The money.
Yeah, you're not a hobby show. You don't perceive it as a hobby show. You didn't start it to be a hobby show.
The hobby for us is the motorcycle. So if I quit doing podcasting tomorrow, motorcycling for me is a lifestyle. I'll do that until I can still keep up on two wheels. Because I like sharing the information with other people and reporting on new things and talking about opinions and having other people's opinions. So for us, it's, like you said, it is perception, but it's, I don't know, the hobby thing. It's hard for me to.
This word, money and hobby, throws off everybody, man. I'm telling you, this is what caused craziness in the forums. It's like,
I just oh
my God, like it's
you're providing a service with the audacity to podcast. Is your hobby teaching? You know what I mean? Like, I learn stuff from you as a service. How is that a hobby?
Well, see, for me, I'm kind of spread all over the place. So I have 3 separate podcasts, and they are all paying for themselves. The Audacity to Podcast, to me, that's totally business. Everything I see about that's a business podcast, business of educating people. It started as a hobby, yes, because I just felt like I got something I want to say out there, and I had no plans to turn it into a business. But then I have 2 other podcasts, my podcast about the TV show Once Upon a Time, and the podcast, Clean Comedy Podcast. Now, the TV show fan podcast, we were more strategic in that, so we do that because we enjoy it, but it is also a part of the business, so I do treat it like a business. Now, our comedy podcast, though, totally a hobby. But what we did there is we put it on hiatus for a while, and it was on hiatus for a long time, and people kept asking us, when's the show coming back? When's it coming back? And our plans of what we wanted to do with that podcast just didn't pan out. So what I did is I put out a video to say, hey, if you want the show to come back, please support us on Patreon, and that will tell us that you want it to come back. And if we get to a certain level, we'll bring the show back on a monthly basis. If we get back to another level, we'll bring it back on a weekly basis. And if we get to another level, we'll bring it back even more than that. So the comedy podcast I see as pure hobby. I do that one because I enjoy it, and I invite other people to enjoy it too. And because they see value in it, they are paying for its expenses. They're paying for us to continue doing it. I'm not making you can look on Patreon, patreon.com/theramennoodle. It's now, I think, $25, and we have 7 patrons. That's fine. We said if we make $20 a month, we'll bring the podcast back, and that's basically to cover the cost of hosting the media.
And that's where, Adam Curry and John C. Dvorak do the No Agenda show. and they call their business model value for value. And those guys have people donating thousands of dollars every week, but it's because they provide information that you can't get anyplace else. So I think that's the bottom line, is you have to deliver value, and if you don't and then ask for value in return, they're going to go, why would that's the thing. And I think that's where a lot of people go, well, I'm putting out a show, I talked into the microphone, where's the money from the heavens? It's like, well, did you deliver value?
And that's the thing. I mean, you can, you have to deliver value if you probably want it to be successful.
Right.
You don't. I mean, you could be a comedy. You can call yourself a comedy podcast. It really sucks. 5 people listen. You can still ask for money. You might get $5, but value is also so subjective.
Exactly.
The beauty of a podcast is people don't accidentally subscribe to a podcast for the most part. Their hand doesn't slip. They know what they sign up because they want to. So for them, it is value. Now, if you're going to be getting $400 a month or $4, that's a different thing. If we're talking about strategies to be bigger, then more value is probably going to help that. But again, so subjective. So much here is subjective.
I keep wanting to press the button to give you guys props, but we're not on that platform right now.
Not on the BLAB. Hey, we've been there a couple times. We've been there. We're alternating. This show, it's just a hobby, Daniel. Oh, I didn't even think about it. That's actually pretty funny. In no way is this show monetized.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because so even on YouTube, I'm in the YouTube partner program, so it allows me to put ads. I don't do it on the Roundtable, partially because one of the issues that this can bring up, and we've talked about this before. Okay, so you're not alone. Steven, you mentioned you have a co-host, and then you decide you want to start making money. That can get ugly. Daniel and Dave, I love those guys. We're friends, and I don't even want to bring money into that. It's not worth it, the return. So, because then you got to figure out who gets more. How do we divide it up? And you might need to draw up a contract. So that's another PSA. It's important if you have co-host and you decide to start making money, you bring up new issues. So, Steven, I don't know if you have something to say about that, but it is another aspect to this.
Yeah, no, it's our relationship is very good. We're very close friends, and to me, the money's not important. So if it came a situation where we couldn't cover an expense, splitting it, I'd take care of it.
Money has broken up a lot of relationships because that motorcycle show you have suddenly gets picked up by the History Channel, and they're offering big bucks, and people get weird.
Yeah,
we both work. Chris is in the Navy. I work in the fire service. We both were public servants. And I've had a really long career. I've been in the fire service for 35 years, so I'm in a different position than he's in, and I don't mind. If I can.
Right.
Yeah, and if there were, we also get gear. The manufacturers will send us gear to test, and unlike you, we don't have to return it usually. So there's been times where I've sent it to him, or it's just like I said, him and I are friends, and we try to keep it like that. And
and that it starts like that almost all the time, and then
they send you motorcycles.
That'd be nice.
You'd be surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised. You were talking about it, of course. They would.
Not right now, but there are those opportunities where you can get demo bikes to ride, not necessarily on the motorcycles to keep, but you will get demo bikes. Some of these bigger manufacturers have rollouts in really cool places, in Europe, and it'd be great if we had the funds and the support to be able to travel to do a rollout and report on it. We were talking about adding value to the show. One of the things that we feel like for us, it's getting to the point where we can buy some swag and be able to give our Patreon supporters T-shirts and things like that, not actually sell them, but just give them to the supporters. But the value we try to add is doing the live interviews. So when we go to a trade show like AIM, we'll do 7 or 8 interviews with new products that are rolled out and try to get them up on YouTube as soon as possible before anyone else does. We've actually, at the last AIM Expo, we broke a story on a new helmet that before anyone had it on YouTube, and it got 4,000 or 5,000 views. So that's a value that we add for the listeners and for the manufacturers because we're helping them promote their product.
It's a good strategy with trade shows. Be first, and you can pick up all those search views on YouTube. I know several people who do that. And Daniel, you just got back from CES,
yeah,
and I'm sure you guys were doing live, so practically, so you you can't crank out a video faster than live, right? So that's one way to do it. So I guess, and even that, again, we get back to is subjective, because that's very good for you and your show. That could bring you more money, right? Advertisers or manufacturers say, wow, Steven and Dan, they're getting first, they're getting the attention. Well, let's shift some dollars that way. So
yeah, and I've heard where people go, well, money's really not an issue because there isn't any.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And then all of a sudden they're like, what? $2,000? And they're like, well, I do all the editing. I do all the, what do you mean? And next thing you know, the Bert and Ernie show is now, the Bert and Oscar show, and there's hurt feelings and crying. It's sad.
The term sellout exists for a reason. Just saying. You wave cash. I told you, man. We just brought up the word money and people freaked out. So valid points, but it gets taken up a notch when you bring money into the conversation, for sure. What about the role of networks? Now, let's rewind a little bit. Daniel, again, you just went to CES with a network. So, does joining networks help the person who isn't interested in making a living on the show, but generating a little income to pay for itself, and maybe do extra things like go to a trade show?
Well, I think it depends on how the network is set up. And generally, podcast networks should be run like businesses, I think, where you have agreements, you have terms and binding contracts and business models and that kind of thing. That's the way to do a podcast network. Now, what I went to CES for is, was with Tech Podcast Network. That is owned by Raw Voice. That's Todd Cochran and his team. And the Audacity Podcast is a member of Tech Podcast Network. So I went there with a bunch of other tech podcasters. And the way that we worked it out is really cool, where, yes, we're there as tech podcasts, but each individual person is there representing themselves and their show. So while there may be similar branding, like you'll start seeing some of my videos from CES come out, and you'll see a different intro and outro to it, still, I introduce myself as being from the Audacity Podcast. And in fact, for this year, we had our own sponsors. So I have a sponsor for my videos. Someone else has a sponsor for their videos. I get the money from my sponsor. They get the money from their sponsor and their videos. And in years past, though, we have done a thing where there was an overall sponsor, and we all needed to do spots for a particular sponsor or a series of sponsors. And the way that worked is that the sponsorship money went first to cover expenses, and then whatever was left was split evenly among the hosts. And that worked out too.
Yeah, and so for the podcaster who's looking, I got a lot of responses on Twitter and such when I asked a question, and some people, say, oh, heck no, or we've tried. Someone else who's going to join us said that they put the Patreon out, and maybe they have affiliate links, and they just it's silent, right? Nothing has happened, and there could be a lot of reasons for that. Maybe there's better ways you could do it, or you're not reaching the right people. Who knows? There's certainly a way to make it successful, I think, for anyone, and again, success on a level that is not crazy. We're not trying to be rich here at all. So
I am.
Are you, Gary? You sound rich because that income report, man. If we can just flip that into 1 year instead of
Divide by 12, yeah.
Erase the 2 on the end. So, but yeah, no, and it's an interesting question, because once you start making a little, it does at some point, it sort of snowballs, right? Like other people get on board, you get bigger, and then you hit another level. But that's a different roundtable. A different roundtable. Gary, you want to say something? I just wanted to say one thing though, the network thing. Do you guys think that's a good idea for? Okay, the hobbyist podcaster. What do we want to call it then? Do you want to call it the for fun podcaster? The independent podcaster seems to be all the rage now, Dave, right?
Yeah.
But you know what I mean. The person who is either is not making money, either trying or not. Are networks a way to do that? Because maybe they've tried Patreon and it's not working for them.
Well, if you're a casual or hobbyist podcaster and you join a network, you're not going to make a lot, because even if the network gives you advertising opportunities, it's still going to be relative to the size of your audience. So if your audience isn't very big, you're not going to make much still.
Yeah.
But there can be ways that you can save money by being on a network, like maybe you don't have to pay for your website hosting or media hosting or premium plugins, or that's the kind of stuff that I provide to people that are on Noodle Mix Network. But there are also the other things that aren't money that benefit by networking with other podcasters, like the growth from being on a podcast network, the cross promotion, the opportunities, and more leverage to do cool things like podcast awards and other cool things that you can do when multiple people are working together.
Right, and like you said, maybe your audience isn't big. Maybe you need to do one before the other, right? So maybe a network is going to help you grow that audience. It's going to expose you to that audience that exists in that niche. And again, it's also dependent on the network itself, right? They could just pay out across the board evenly just because they want to add content. Glenn the Geek, which famously appeared on at Podcast Movement and Dave's show, very popular in School of Podcasting, a must listen. If you go find Glenn the Horse
Podcasting, guy. Yeah, schoolofpodcasting.com/474.
You have to go listen to this interview. So Glenn, thanks for joining us. He says they have 20 hosts, all with contracts. Everything's spelled out from the beginning. They all get paid, and most have been around for 5+ years. So, yeah, maybe you need to grow an audience first. Now, Gary, you were dying to say something.
Well, what I'm wondering is, because you were talking about advertising, and that kind of gets in the way, but what is legitimate to do on your show to pitch getting contributions? Somebody mentioned Adam Curry, who I'm proud to mention supports Ham Radio Now. He sent me money. He's a ham. And they spend about the last quarter of their show talking about the people who have sent the money, which makes those people really happy when they hear their name mentioned. And I think everybody else listening says, yeah, there's somebody else sending some money. I sent some money. That's wonderful. Is he the only one who can get away with that?
No.
I spend a minute or so on the shows at the beginning and the end, pointing to the piggy bank back there and asking folks to go to the website and make a contribution, and it does okay. Could we do better, but it does okay. It's probably doing really well compared to the size of the audience, because my average shows are 2,000 to 5,000 people, and I probably have 300 or 400 that send money, and PBS would kill for numbers like that as a percentage.
There's a big psychological thing about asking for money, though.
It's tough. That's another barrier. That's a very tough one. And the thing is, you can't please everybody. If we know anything, that's it. So that's where this gets very tough. Dave.
So I could go to the Logical Weight Loss podcast, and I could say, hey, go buy a Fitbit. I love my Fitbit, blah, blah, blah. logicalloss.com/Fitbit. I would make $10. And some people have no problem doing that. How about we just cut out the middleman, and let's save you some money? So you don't have to spend $100. How about you just give me 10? Because that's what I'm going to get out of that $100. So that's another way of looking at it. You're saving your audience money, and you're cutting out the middleman. So I had a sponsor, but I had an affiliate thing with a company called FitDeck. I made $1.50 every time somebody bought a $15 deck of cards, and that hit like gangbusters with my audience, because I said you can play with your kids, you can deal them in exercise, and I was making like $300-400 a month, $1.50 at a time. So when you get the right product, it works. But on the other hand, if you're worried about the whole Patreon thing, that's an easy way to think about it. It's like, look, instead of pimping a product that you have to go spend $30-40 on so I can make 2, how about you just send me 2 and I'll save you $38?
That's a good way of looking at it. I mean, it's funny because in as long as we've been on the air and all the shows that we've done, I've never done the Patreon thing at the end. Chris always does, which is, I mean, I have no problem asking him to go to an affiliate link and buy something, but when it comes to actually doing that pitch at the end, he does. And we thank everybody, too. We don't spend as much time doing it. It's kind of every other show we do it.
Yeah, and that goes for asking for reviews or rating. It goes for asking for anything. I think we started to help, probably to share. It's hard for us to ask for stuff back, but you hear the famous, if you don't ask, No
Right.
one's going to know it exists, right? So either trying or not, you can sort of have it there. It may or may not be successful. I will say Emily in the chat, she says, thank you, by the way, for using the term hobbyist. She enjoys it, as opposed to the more pejorative sounding amateur. So semantics, man. It's just, you can't please everybody.
It really depends on how you ask, too. Because, hey, Ray, can I have $10?
No, you can't have to.
Hey, Ray, can I have $10? I really want to do this thing for you that's really cool, but it's going to cost a little bit of money, and I need only about $10 more to do it. Can I do that? Can I have the $10 so I can do that for you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I listen to your show like all the time.
See,
this was not pre-planned.
Yeah, bad example, weird example, but that's basically the difference. Is I hear podcasters say, you can donate to us, or please donate to us. And that's basically all they say. But I forget who it was who interviewed, I don't know who, but someone interviewed someone about Patreon. Maybe it was Brian on ProfitCast, or maybe Dave Jackson, someone. But they said the important thing with your Patreon campaign, and this can apply to any time you're asking people for money, is communicate the value, communicate the need, communicate what more will help your audience if they contribute. For example, with our Once Upon a Time podcast, that's making a few $100s per month, or it's earning a few $100s per month from that podcast from donations. In every episode, not only do I thank the people by name who donate, and I transition to that in often funny ways, and they enjoy that, but also I explain why that's important and what they get when, or what special milestones we might be able to achieve when they support us. Like with our Clean Comedy podcast, it was when we reach this milestone, we'll bring the podcast back, or when we reach a different milestone, we'll bring you more episodes. So it's that value for value. But also with our Once Upon a Time podcast, each time I mention our sponsor, or our heroes, we call them, the people who support the podcast, I communicate that it does cost money to run the podcast. It a couple $100s a month for this stuff, for that stuff, all of this, all of that, and communicate to them that we're bringing this to you, this free podcast to you, and if you appreciate it, then please support the podcast, and that will enable us to bring more podcast episodes to you, or to do some other thing. So you have to communicate what value people will get, or simply let them know what expense there is that you're trying to cover, instead of simply saying, give me money, basically.
Right. We've been successful, too, with in-kind contributions. So we've had people that have, we have one of the listeners now that's redesigning the website for us. We've had artwork done from listeners that was phenomenal. Our new logo was done by a listener who also has a business that we're supporting as well. But that's been pretty successful as well, is in-kind help, which has cut down the cost that we've had to come out of pocket with as well. So it's, to us, the value is just as much as if they would have paid to the Patreon account.
I've told viewers that I needed to buy a camera or something, and that got contributions sort of dedicated to that. I had a show where I did a podcast driving down the road in my car, and I had trouble getting my sound to it because the lavalier picked up a lot of road noise. And a guy said, well, you need to get one of these so you can just put it on and it'll be sitting there in front of your mouth. And by the way, here's $50, and it costs $80, so I've paid for more than half of it. So somebody did. I say ham radio now is brought to you by you, and I'm not unique to that phrase, but I don't hear it very much. And I also tell people McDonald's will not give me a Happy Meal for a podcast, so you kind of need your cash.
Unless you do the McDonald's Happy Meal podcast, and then they probably sue you, and you don't only get money, you have to give money.
Yeah.
But
I'll do my show from a McDonald's. And
there you go.
Well, I want to piggyback on what Daniel said. I was mentioning weekly web tools, and on my last episode, weeklywebtools.com/110, I found a plugin that does automatic retweeting, much like TweetDeck and Edgar. And I said, so if you're using these things, I just saved you $50 a month. I said, so if that's how I basically went into my Patreon pitch. I'm like, and if you found that useful, and that's the whole thing. I say, if you find this valuable and feel like contributing, because if you don't, that's fine too. It's always like, if you found this valuable and you feel like contributing, here's how you can. George Robb does the Geologic podcast. He's a musician, And basically his audience had bought everything they could buy from the guy in terms of music. And so when he put out a book and then he started a Patreon page, and they're like, finally, because they just wanted to give back more because he gives so much. So there are times when your audience wants to give back, and when you give them an option, they're kind of thankful that you gave them a way to do that.
Yeah, and that can be what happened. You start a show to help, and you're putting out great stuff, and the audience will actually say, hey, how can we support this? Because you know what we don't want? We don't want to see it go away. That's the thing, and we all know when you do, we as podcasters run into services that are free services all the time, and Dave will famously tell you a laundry list of services that go away because free is not really a business model. Now, again, if you're perceiving your show as a business or not, that's a different story. But one of the nice things about Patreon versus just a simple donate button is that thing where you can give more value. You can talk about the value you give, but on Patreon you've got those rewards things. So most people offer something. It might not be a physical product, but maybe the $5 gets you a mug or a T-shirt. That costs more than $5 or whatever. But you say, I appreciate that, or you give away time. Maybe it's like, hey, we'll jump on Skype for half an hour and we'll shoot the hay and work on some technical issues or something. So you can give back, and that's even more than you're already giving. And that's nice, especially if you're uncomfortable with asking. You can just increase the value if that helps, make you feel better. But yeah, asking for things in your podcast. We did a round about are we asking our audience for too much? I forget which round that was, quite a while ago, but I think it was sort of centered around that idea about all the calls to action, right? And we load up those things, and so there's a lot. You should check that one out if that's a tough nut for you to crack. But anyone else? So we're going to start wrapping up. But this topic, if you want to start, if you never thought, if you got in because it's something you enjoy and you wouldn't mind covering that lips and bill, or you would like to add on maybe a cool plug-in or something, and maybe that's something that can be done from the audience. Anyone, you guys, any other? I doubt we've covered half the strategies or techniques for doing that, but time goes fast.
Well, look at it this way. If your favorite TV show came on and said, hey, everybody, if you enjoy this show, please donate over at such and such, we'd all think, what? Wait a minute. You're making money from all the ads and all of this other stuff. Why are you asking us for money? Sure, some people would donate. But then again, if the show came on and said, hey, everybody, this is our last episode, but if we can raise this amount of money by such and such date, then we can keep the show going, but it's only with your support.
99% invisible, I think. Yeah. That's sort of an infamous story, right? Yeah. Where he said, I can't do this anymore. Went to the audience and he set a record on Kickstarter for contributions because that audience just turned out and said, heck no, don't go away.
It gives the audience ownership. And if you can give them ownership or give them value, ownership is valuable, but that's the way to get them to consider donating, to being a supporter, to being a contributor, gift in kind, or just helping you, giving you reviews, or telling other people about the podcast, or buying something for you.
Right, and it's tricky. I mean, it's not a strategy. Don't say we're going to turn off the lights, and you don't really, you have to actually have being put out by, it has to be real. Please don't take that as, I could try this one, they'll donate. So that's important. I mean, the thing with that is, again, it all goes back to trust. Like if you think they're pulling a fast one on you, please don't listen, or please don't donate to someone you think is pulling a fast one on you. So, you can get in touch and have a more real conversation about what's going on, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's, there is things that the audience will step up and do, and sometimes you don't ask, and then now you've, by people have had stuff just sent to them. And now, like, oh wait, now am I a business? I didn't even ask for this. Please take it back. I don't want to be a business. So it gets tricky. And again, back to that PSA, man. Every state is different. You really need to look into it for your own thing. But you guys, anything more about, maybe what was the decision to actually? How do you make that decision to go from not asking to asking?
Well, I think it just help to cover the costs, and as you grow and you get bigger and you want to add more aspect to the show. You almost kind of have to, you know. Plus, we didn't really want to turn this into something that we had to pay for, especially when people enjoyed it. So I think it comes with growth, really.
Yeah, but I mean, you said you went into it as, I'm a media outlet. I want to cover these things. Like, so, you know, you didn't want to turn it into something you want to pay for, but you wanted to compete or be level with someone else who would cover a show. So that's a tough conundrum, right? I want to.
Part of it was listening to other shows in the same market, and they're doing it, you know. And so again, trying to stay at the same level.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's a hard question to answer, Ray, because it depends all on the individual. I think some people, and you know, Dave and Daniel could probably answer this better. I think there are people that might be going into podcasting now because they think there is money raining from the sky.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
That is what creates part of the problem. Is it's always one bad seed, and someone comes in with this built-in bias because they were pitched by someone who's here to get rich quick, without the value or the history or the relationship. So that creates a problem. You know, when the door is open for anyone to enter, which podcasting is, it becomes you have to wade through a lot of waters. And so I can understand why people get jaded sometimes.
Ham radio now is an expensive show to do. It as a television show. So I've got 4 cameras that averaged $2,000. Editing equipment, all that stuff. And in addition to doing some talking head type shows, I try to get out in the field and do documentary things, and they are, as you mentioned earlier, time consuming to edit. So I'll do between probably averaging 20 hours a week, which is, you know, like a part-time job, just on this program, and it's got to bring something back. Now I freelance, and I still have some freelance clients, but if I didn't do this, I could go dig out more freelance clients, and I'd rather not. I'd rather do this.
See, and I think that's the key. I think we jump in because we're passionate about a topic, and we're like, man, this is awesome. I love to talk about this stuff. 7 episodes in, you're like, man, this is a lot of time. And if I'm going to spend this much time, I really want to do this, but I got to have a little bit coming back to make it work. I think that's the general path that I see a lot of people jump into.
And that might not be something that is handed. That may be something that's handed to you. I know, like in Todd Cochran, I believe he talks about his wife. He had 6 months to be profitable, or he was coming out of that basement. You're not spending that much time to do that thing. So
right.
that directive could be coming from.
Don't say that. My wife is watching.
Gary, make more money.
Dude, that happened with my wife. Like, how much are you making doing this? I'm like,
That's the funny part. I mean, and that's the thing. I think I've told my wife before. I'm like, at least, I mean, my hobby has the opportunity to make money, and does. A lot of hobbies don't have the opportunity. I mean, you can always create opportunity. I mean, I can find a way to make money from any hobby. I can teach a class on my hobby. I made money from my hobby, or did I make money from teaching? Whatever. The point is, yeah. I mean, it is nice, and I think a lot of people they had no idea. And who doesn't want to do what they love for a living? I mean, I do what I love for a living. People have a hard time separating that I work for a company and I podcast for myself. Like, people think they confuse the two. But, you know, man, that was a dream job for me, to be able to get paid to do what I'm already doing in my spare time. Yes, and I would love to see more people do that. And they get on the mic and they discover, I'm good at this. People love it. And hey, making a little money, but you got to start somewhere. And I think most podcasters, they don't want that, and don't want to make a living, but they would like to bring a little income in, and that's this ground. That's where we sit right here. It's that in between ground, I think.
I wonder if we collectively, as I'll say, quote, successful podcasters, unquote, if we've somewhat tainted the waters with people almost thinking that they can pay for their expenses in this hobby, whereas most other hobbies don't pay for their own expenses. I know we talk often about making money with podcasting, and sometimes I wonder, do we talk about that so much that people are thinking, oh yeah, I'll start this thing as a hobby, and my hobby will pay for itself? That's certainly a wrong expectation. but how much are we fueling that?
I don't know. It's tough because I think the threshold that we're talking, again, someone might be wanting to pay their $5 a month Libsyn hosting account, and that's 2 clicks of an affiliate. So the threshold can be low. I don't think that any of us here hold out, hey, you're going to make some big money. Can you? Sure. The majority? No. But I mean, so I don't know. I don't think by opening the door we do. I think there are definitely people in the space who make it seem a little bit more get rich quick, but again, how much do you? I hope you have a good enough relationship with your podcaster that you kind of know what's going on.
I try not to talk about that or answer those questions. As a matter of fact, recently I had an intern at work talk to me about starting a podcast, and I direct them to you guys, honestly, because my forte is not talking about how to podcast, right. And I don't even talk about the money that we ask for, that we make, or how it's. I direct those people those questions to you. To me, you guys are the professionals when it comes to talking about podcasting. I don't even want to discuss that because I'm not 100% sure that we're even doing it right when it comes to funding the show. So I try to avoid that because I don't want to discourage anybody either. I don't want to say, when we talk about paying for the show, it's really relative. This gear wasn't paid for the show, so there was an outlay of money out of my pocket. I don't want to discourage anybody yet. I don't want to give them any false hope like they're going to, quit their job talking about, Game of Thrones. I will direct them to people that talk about that on a regular basis, and you guys can give better real-life world experiences that have been doing it longer about what the costs really are and, what you may or may not be able to pocket. So.
Yeah, I mean, we can go into, we could just keep going. So maybe I find myself at this junction at the end of most roundtables where it's like, wow, we could do a whole another one. And so we found branches of this conversation to break off into. But I'm gonna wrap it up, and because I usually it's about an hour, and while I rant on shutting it down, when you do live, it's a little different. And so I thank everyone for joining us in the chat. It looks like Emily and Kim and Troy, Gary. So our new chat, which seems like it's having some growing pains. We heard that over on the event page. So we'll work on that, Max. So I'm talking to Max. But I think Chrome is having issues with the chat. Could be come from my site. We'll have to see. Podcasting. That'll be a 6-hour fix, right, Dave? So what's that time worth? All right. So we're gonna wrap up. Thanks so much. Head on out. Let us know where we can find your podcast, and thank you for joining us, Daniel.
I'm Daniel J. Lewis at theaudacitytopodcast.com. And remember, in case no one else says it, talk to a certified accountant about these things. When in doubt, make sure you do it legally.
Right. And, Stephen, that's the thing with podcasting. Again, the door is open. Anyone can do it. You refer to us. You see us as professionals. I don't have special training. I don't have legal training. Hopefully, we always remember to give those kind of advice. We're all talking. You have to be you have to be everything with a grain of salt when it comes to a podcast or any media, really. I mean, ask questions. That's most important, right? Ask questions beyond just the one person you listen to, like Daniel says. If you are getting into this, then seek out advice from that professional, right? From a lawyer if you're getting into paperwork, an accountant if it's coming to money. Seek out those, because please don't take that advice from me. I am not a lawyer and accountant. Dave, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Dave Jackson, School of Podcasting.com, and I'd be an idiot if I didn't say check out my book, More Podcast Money, at morepodcastmoney.com.
Totally appropriate. See,
Yes.
That's how you ask for something. Short and sweet, relevant, right? Relevant to the conversation. Yes, so I agree. Check out Dave's book, and I can vouch for having good content because I know Dave. Gary, thanks so much for joining us. Your first roundtable.
It is, and it's been a pleasure. I'll say that I am incorporated, although I did that for my freelance business, but it helped with the podcasting stuff because it makes enough money that, there's a tax implication. We are at hamradionow.tv. A shout out to the hams in your audience. You have hams in your audience. You probably don't know, but everybody stick your call sign in the chat room and let them know how many hams are out there. I also ride motorcycles, so cool, Steve. And hamradionow.tv, but after listening to the previous program, it's also available at hamradionow.com. So
the domain one. Yeah, check the previous round about domains. What was that called? It's about I think we talked about all the domains you own. How many domains you own or something like that? Dave owns 97. He has a problem. Yes, but the .com, if you have that, you're in business. So check out a whole hour about that. So yeah, Gary, yeah, definitely we have hams, the original podcasters, ham radio guys probably, and yeah,
the original social media.
Oh, the original social media.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, very important service. We have some great teams of hams locally when an emergency breaks out, man. They get together and they really help out. So, and they're looking to do stuff with that from podcasting. So we appreciate it. Adam Curry supported ham radio.
He does. I got a contribution just a week or so ago.
Very cool. Yes,
value for value.
I think on my Twitter profile it's a picture with the Podfather. We got to meet him at well, Dave, you probably met him way back in the day, but Podcast Movement, that was cool. Yeah. All right, hey, Steven, thanks for the reco, by the way, sending people to our show. That's amazing. That's what happens. That's so much fun. I know I've got a show for you. Go check it out. So hopefully that's the way podcasts are growing, because people are saying you have to go listen to this thing or get your answer here. But thanks for joining us for your first roundtable.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Steven Grasso, CafeRacerPodcast.com, and we're all over the internet like that, on Twitter, Instagram, pretty much everywhere. It was a pleasure. I'd like to do it again. A lot of fun.
Awesome. Yes. Well, with the superior audio you guys are bringing, how could I say no?
Yeah.
No, it's the contributions you guys. Everyone, it's so amazing. This show, we always discover so many new people, and really the goal of the show is to expose what would be probably Dave, Daniel, and I, our normal audience, to podcasts that are outside of the podcasting niche, because we've been doing this for so long now. Everyone has so much experience to share, and that's one of the best byproducts of this show. Is like, oh man, I didn't even know that show existed, or Gary's such a cool guy, or I ride motorcycles. So very cool. Okay, we're out of here. Thanks everybody. Thanks chat. We will see you next time for round 65 in a couple weeks. Wave goodbye. Here we go. Adios. Got an affiliate link for that hand, Dave?